give me a very layman understanding of what is really mental health, right? I mean, there's a lot of taboo around it as well in India.
Psychiatrists come from the background of medical health, MBBS and all these background. So they are the only ones under psychology who prescribe medicines and who are allowed to do that. Going to bed at the same time every day, waking up at the same time, so that the body gets reconditioned to how it has to function. Trauma is subjective in terms of how people experience it. And I go and tell them that, hey, I'm feeling really low today. I don't know why. I've just been in a phase of self-doubting. I acknowledge that this is happening with me. Forget others. The taboo is somewhere still there within us. Why should I go? Why should I go to therapy?
About anxiety. There are a lot of conversation happens, and it has become a day-to-day word now that I'm anxious. I'm so much of anxiety attacks and stuff like that. Namaste everyone. Welcome to Manoyana Podcast. In this episode, we will be having a chat with a psychologist, and we will be uncovering the world of psychology, mental health, and a lot about mental health professionals. Now, in this episode, we'll also be talking about a lot of terms that we commonly use, and we either misinterpret or we misuse the word, or sometimes there's altogether a different thing to it, but we very casually use it. So we'll be talking about these terms, and also how your personal life can affect your professional life, because when you say you're a founder, you have a lot of things to carry on, right? And how that affects how, a small imbalance in your personal life, or because you are from a different cult altogether, how does it affect your personal life? We'll be discovering about all of this. We'll be discovering a little bit about relationship, a little bit about work-life balance, and a lot more things. So I'm so excited today to have this podcast, and I hope you also are on the same page. So let's dive in. So let's welcome our guest for the day. We have with us Disha. She is a psychologist, and she has done her master's in clinical psychology, and she's a practicing psychologist at Reroute. So a very warm welcome to you for the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive into the show. Before going into all of the things that we thought about, right? Give me a very layman understanding of what is really mental health, right? I mean, there's a lot of taboo around it as well in India. So make our users and me understand, nutshell, what mental health is all about.
Okay. Mental health basically is an overall perspective of how an individual is doing. It depends on the emotional well-being, the psychological well-being, how an individual thinks, behaves, how they experience a lot of emotions, how they handle a lot of emotions. All these things are linked to each other. Plus, all these things have a certain kind of impact on how we show ourselves to the outside world. So this is what mental health in general is.
Okay, wonderful. So, like if we go a little dive into the mental health, then comes a very, important part of mental health are the mental health professionals, right? So we also call it Dimag ka doctor, as quoted in Dear Zindagi, right? So there's psychiatrists, there's psychologists, there is so many people. So kind of give an idea of who does what in the mental health professional space.
Basically, there's three categories when it comes to professionals under mental health. There's counselor, there's clinical psychologist, and then there is psychiatrist. Counselors are also called as counseling psychologists as well. The natural run is that an individual goes and sees the counselor first. Depending on the severity, they go see a clinical psychologist to get diagnosed or to understand the intensity of the issue. And then when the problem is extremely severe, they go to a psychiatrist. That is where the medicines come into the picture. Psychiatrists come from the background of medical health, MBBS and all these background. So they are the only ones under psychology who prescribe medicines and who are allowed to do that.
So let's say if so you fall under the second category, which is a psychologist, and counselors are the first ones who can do. So do counselors also have to have a medical degree, or where do they come from?
No, you need to have a bachelor's and a master's degree, and if you want to specialize, like say child psychologist, or you want to specialize as a trauma psychologist, then you need to have a certain kind of work experience under the same, with certain kind of upskilling and certifications required.
Okay. So, are these counselors same as one available in generally big companies or in schools? Are they same or are they?
Yes, in companies, MNCs, and organizations, there we call it as organizational psychology. There they study specific related to these certain sectors, and they come to that. In schools, available are either general counselors or student counseling or children counseling.
Okay.
Most of the basic is the same to understand the concepts. We just have to understand how can we get a little bit more specific required accordingly to the audience. That is how we have to specialize accordingly.
Okay. So you have done clinical psychology, right? So in, like you said, a lot of things. So what do you specialize in?
So basically in India, to be called as a clinical psychologist, RCI license is required. That is done by MPhil course and the requirements of that. I have done my master's in clinical psychology. I am not an RCI licensed psychologist, but I am still allowed to practice, and my keen interest is leaning towards a little bit of trauma and the complex issues. So I am trying to work with the same kind of people until I'll be able to do more.
Let's understand, like you said, there is a hierarchy that is there: counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Right now, you already know mental health is now it's far better, but it's kind of still a taboo because
Right.
they don't see a physical wound. Like mental health is not like that, and I think a lot of people are not even aware that they have certain issues. Right.
Right.
So let's talk about the issues a little later. I mean, that's what we are talking about, but. Before that, let's understand, imagine if somebody has an issue, right? What is the hierarchy they have to follow? Is it really the same way, or because everybody is accessible? I can go directly talk to a counselor, talk to a psychologist, talk to a psychiatrist. Most people end up in clinic and they start from psychiatrist, right? So how do one know that they have to go, who is the right person to talk to in the first place?
The hierarchy is present based on the intensity of the issues. Right, so if an individual has very severe issues, they're at the moment of crisis, the stress levels are too high for them to manage in any other ways. To a certain extent, talk therapy or going to a psychotherapist will help. But if that is still not making any difference, the distress is so intense that they're not able to do anything, then it is better to start from psychiatrists. So because the moment there is certain kind of medical help, the body tends to stay a little more calmer.
Okay.
And then they can sit and resolve whatever their concerns and issues are accordingly.
Unless until that it's like too much for them to handle and it's help, like it's affecting their physical health also, they have to go see a psychiatrist.
Right.
If it's still not at that stage?
It is not just the physical health, it is also the basic daily functioning.
Okay.
You're not able to do what you generally do.
Give me an example.
Like as simple as for an individual, if waking up is a whole big task, maybe a sign of depression. And
that happens to me on Mondays.
Those are just Monday blues. That we'll address when we come to the misused terms, right?
Yeah.
When an individual has difficulty doing their normal tasks on a regular basis, and this stress or this difficulty is there for a prolonged period of time, that is when they have to give extra attention to it. Once in a while, once in a day, it happens to everybody. Ups and downs need to keep happening, so that's okay. But once it keeps happening more frequently, more regularly, they're not able to focus, they keep forgetting the smallest of things, which is not out of their nature. Or they're generally enjoying socializing, but suddenly they feel disinterested in all of these things. They are not into doing their hobbies. This is when they'll have to start paying attention to how are they doing mentally.
Let's discuss about a few terminologies that are either misused or misinterpreted. Okay, so I'll just kind of tell you the terms, and you can talk about how they're misused or how they are actually what that means. Okay, let's start with depression. Generally, what happens? People say, I'm so depressed. This morning is so bad, or I couldn't go out with my friends this weekend, so I'm so depressed. So, what is actually depression means, and how people misuse it?
Clinical depression basically is diagnosed, or you can tell that you're experiencing depression when it is a persistent mood change. Like for example, when I'm telling persistent, it is there consistently for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's not like a one-timely thing. Like, you have it once and then something else cheers you up and okay, now the depression is gone. That doesn't happen. Clinically speaking, depression is a disorder. It is a mood disorder where people experience low mood, disinterest, certain kind of physical dreadness, heaviness, all these things. But it has to stay for at least 2 to 6 weeks to be diagnosed as depression.
And anything that is lesser than that, what do you generally term it as?
See, even any mental disorder for that aspect, especially mood disorders, they are on spectrums.
Okay.
So we can tell there's a mild depression, moderate depression, and severe depression, right? If it is something that has been affecting an individual for a good amount of time, but not long enough to diagnose them with clinical depression, then it is more likely to be a phase. Okay. Where due to some different coping mechanism or some changes in their personal, professional or social life has enhanced it and they did not dive into the pool.
Okay, it's just maybe they're
yes.
sad or they're
yes.
anxious
yes.
or they're
yes.
unhappy for something.
Yes, but if that does get prolonged and there is no change in how they are feeling or how they're experiencing all these emotions, then it is diagnosed as clinical depression.
Another term which is very commonly used in a lot of people use it, that even if they see something teda meda, they say, hey, I have OCD, this is not fine. And even if something is not clean in general, right, they say, oh, I'm so clean, I have OCD, right? What OCD really means and when do people should really think about that they have OCD?
OCD, in other words, is obsessive compulsive disorder. There are two aspects into this disorder. Obsessive in terms of thoughts, there is repetitive, persistent thoughts that don't stop. Compulsive behavior, there is a compulsion to carry out a certain kind of action. It could be arranging and keeping things in a certain way. It could be cleaning your hands or a place in the number of times. It could be in terms of storing and not throwing out away things or collecting souvenirs, even when it doesn't really is a souvenir as such. So OCD has a broad aspect into it. There are two components mainly. One is behavior, one is thought. People can be very disciplined, they can be very organized, where they tend to demand for certain things in a certain way. I like the room to be clean, I like my desk to be arranged. That itself doesn't mean they have OCD as such, because when these certain things are not the way they are in, people with OCD experience a lot of distress, to a certain extent where they're not able to carry on with their day's work, where they're affected in terms of mood, where they're affected in terms of their functionality. That is when OCD comes into the picture.
Okay. It's just that if they don't like certain environment or if they find something not very clean, it's not really the OCD that they're having. It's maybe just that they're feeling that it's not clean and it agitates them a bit.
Right. And also again, over here also what comes is that for every single thing, every single time, from a long period, they're affected by it. Today is a special day, I need my house to be clean and it is not clean and I get affected, I do not have OCD. I always have to have my home clean. Even if I've cleaned it 10 times yesterday, I am compulsive to clean it again 5 to 8 times today. Then I have OCD.
Okay. The dust will only be visible to them, not to anybody else. Okay, got it. Great. Another term which is very common in corporates majorly, right? And majorly associated with work stress, which is burnout. I'm so burnt out, I'm really dried and all of these, right? So what is the, demystify it?
Burnout, it is more in use in the present days because people are experiencing it more. Not just because it is something that people are familiar with, but maybe the context where they're using it is somewhere getting misinterpreted. Burnout basically means when an individual is experiencing a certain kind of stress. It could be emotional stress, it could be physical stress, it could be professional stress, academic stress, whatever it is, any kind of stress for a very long time. So one, that is stress. When the stress itself becomes so continuous, it becomes fatigue. When this fatigue is present for a very long time, that is when the burnout happens. Basically, when an individual is experiencing burnout, they are not able to recover from it very easily. It's not like I'm tired, I'll go sleep, I will eat a little bit and I'm energized for the next day. Burnout takes a little bit much more longer time for that.
Okay. So that is now, I think burnout is also very common in these days because of this hustle culture that is there in the ecosystem, where people are expected to perform way better than and there are a lot of peer pressure, a lot of societal requirements as well, right? So let's say, I mean, people generally, like you mentioned, that okay, I do extreme activity, then I pass out completely. Probably next day I get up and get freshened up. And whereas burnout, which actually is kind of similar, but it has happened. I mean, it will happen for a long period of time, right? And what is the major, apart from the time factor between these two things? Is there something very different that happens where people can see, oh, this is actually burnout, this is just a fatigue that I'm facing?
Okay, to tell it in more simpler ways, when you are not giving yourself enough breaks mentally and physically, when I tell mentally, it is emotionally, socially, all of it is combined. Your body gives up on you. It decides to take a break, and it doesn't ask you, is today a good day? You will just dread the day. You will not be able to carry on, enjoy, or be at your best, as simple as that. This is the basic understanding of burnout. Like how you said, people are into the hustle culture. Half the stress and pressure is given by the external world, but half the stress is given by ourselves. We are our own worst enemies, right? So half the stress is put by ourselves, that if I don't do this, if I don't do this. Until the body collapses, like how you said, or until you just don't have it in yourself, if people keep doing it, the recovery period is required at that moment is a much more longer time. It is not like I function until I collapse, and then once I collapsed, I rest until tomorrow morning, and then I get back at my feet. That is not possible when it is burnout. People don't recognize that. People just keep on running and running and running without taking a break. So if anybody is experiencing any kind of burnout, there are social burnouts as well. I don't have energy to go meet people, to go and talk with them, just be there. I feel very tired. It's okay. You can give some time for yourself. Certain place self-prioritization needs to be given a little more importance than it actually is given in the moment.
Now when you're talking about, you said body gives up on you,
right?
That is more of a physical format, right? Let's say, how does a mental burnout look like?
To give you just an example, I am somebody who enjoys reading book. I am somebody who, you will always see me roaming around with book. If I'm having a mental burnout, I'm not able to sit with the book.
Okay.
The things that I generally like doing. For students, it comes out as academic burnout. They otherwise enjoy learning new things, doing a lot of different projects on their own, want to learn on their own, want to make flashcards, notes and all these things, but they're just too tired. They can't do any of this.
Okay, so there's a break in their whole pattern which they love to do before.
Right. A sudden change with the kind of interest you have towards your specific liked things. That is where the burnout shows up.
And while we're talking about hustle culture, the next word that I'll be picking up is about anxiety. There are a lot of conversation happens, and it has become a day-to-day word now, that I'm anxious, I'm so much of anxiety attacks and stuff like that. So what is this all about?
Anxiety and stress is slightly overlapping, and people tend to misinterpret there. Okay. To give you a general understanding of anxiety is a reaction or an experience that you have at that moment during a kind of stressful period, when there is a certain kind of threat, when there is a certain kind of helplessness that your body is feeling or you are feeling at that moment. That is when a person gets anxious. Anxiety symptoms is quite subjective. For a lot of people, it is getting restless, it is not being able to breathe properly, going short of breath, or they feel that their heart is beating a little too loud, or they feel very sweaty, giddy. All these things tend to come under anxiety. Even under anxiety, there are different spectrums. There is health anxiety, there is social anxiety, there's general anxiety. So there are different spectrums in anxiety as well. People have to understand where are they feeling anxious. How do you differentiate between a normal person and an anxious person is, for a normal person, it's a momentary thing, as simple as for students who go to exam. everybody has jitters. That is very normal, that is common. But an anxious student will probably be so stressed that they're not able to sleep well, they're not able to eat well, they probably have anxiety attacks where they get very overwhelmed, they experience these breathlessness period for a prolonged time than a normal kid would do. That is where you differentiate between...
Anxiety is more of that being in a fearful state for a long time, just thinking about the outcome that's going to happen.
Yes, being in a fearful state for a long period of time for almost everything.
Okay. It's like I want to start something, but I'm afraid that something else will happen. So I am not.
Right.
I'm in always the fear of not starting it.
Right.
At the same time, being in a guilty
Right.
state also. That
Right.
you know.
Right.
Got
Right.
it. Got it. So when you said about this, right? My next word comes from there, which is you said anxiety attacks and everything. When we talk about these attacks, another thing which is a very common word, which is panic attacks.
Right.
Where people like I've heard stories of various panic attacks from people using it as a very common word to people where they had to get hospitalized for it. Right. So what is this panic attack all about?
Panic attack is where all your anxiety symptoms is shown more physically.
Okay.
Right. There's something called as panic attack disorder or panic disorder as well. That is when the panic attacks are prolonged.
Okay.
Even without a certain kind of threat, the body goes into an alert system. It starts shooting out the red lights saying danger, danger and danger, even when there is nothing like that. That is the panic disorder. Anxiety attacks come into the picture when it's the same. Anxiety attacks and panic attacks are the same. Panic attack is a symptom of anxiety, but it is more shown physically. And it happens all of a sudden. Like, for example, I'm having a bad day, but I was able to deal with it. You're well and good. I'm having a bad day, and every time I have a bad day, I have these moments where, I can't breathe properly. I feel the world is collapsing around me. I feel very suffocated. It's a very physical experience that the individual has.
Okay. So whereas anxiety is more mental and...
It is also physical, but it has an equal share of mental worries and thoughts, overthinking and all these things. Because of that, the person is growing restless, they're fidgety, they can't do certain things, right? That is how it is. In panic disorder, the thoughts and the mental aspect of it goes a little low.
Okay.
Because the physical body is hyperactivated.
So why does that happen? Why does physical body picks up that whatever we think mentally, and how is the connection between those two?
Okay, so let's say that there's a kid, okay, where while playing on the street, a street dog would come with a lot of excitement and would jump on the kid. The kid gets afraid, right? The kid's fear is now common to all of the dogs. Along with the specific dog. So the next time when the kid has to see any dog nearby, the body goes back and reminds it of the previous memory. What in other terms we call it as muscle memory. So the body remembers a lot of things of how we experience, how we feel, and the mind tries to work based on that.
Okay.
We know that you don't like the sad thing, so let's just do something else. We zone out. When we know something is so boring, we zone out. When we know something is distressful, we want to find an escape. We want to watch shows, we want to go away, we want to go here. The mind starts searching for escape. So all these symptoms, though we consciously remembering and not remembering is a part of it, the other part is the body keeps the score. There's a book called as Body Keeps the Score. It's actually a very beautiful book to understand about how trauma has an impact on body. But even if you're taking it out of the context of trauma, the body does keep a score of every single thing that you do. As simple as if I ask you about the summer holidays, you remember it as a part of memory, but you also get excited. Your body language just changes as well.
True.
You remember the food you would eat or what you would do.
The childhood memories.
How do you explain that? Your body is activating that memory at that moment. So you're reliving this part of memory. That is what happens in panic attacks. When people tend to keep assuming there is threat and they keep taking up the signs of threat again and again and again, after a certain point of time, the body understands that normalcy is being alert. The switch doesn't go off. That is when the body starts being having random panic attacks even without an actual threat around us.
So it kind of falsifies the whole situation.
Yes. Yes.
Great. I'll take up a very Gen Z term now, okay, which is gaslighting. I think it's used in a different context, even in dating context as well. Right. But in psychology, what does gaslighting mean?
Gaslighting is a very, it is a very planned, systematic way of manipulation into making one person feel that maybe they were the wrong one. In other terms, it is a systematic manipulative way to making an individual think that maybe they were not the right, have self-doubts in them, or maybe they feel a certain kind of guilt all of a sudden. This is very highly misused, especially like how you said in terms of relationships or any kind of attachments. And people tend to assume that every other argument, every other disagreement is also their partner or anybody who's involved there gaslighting them. But that's not the case. Gaslighting is when it is done more intentionally.
Okay. So the person who is doing it is aware that he is doing this effort, or he's unaware of it?
It can be in two ways. One where I want to make sure that the blame doesn't come on me, so I'm going to turn the whole thing against you, saying that, hey, I didn't mean it in that way. I told these words. You understood it wrong. So if you are upset now, that's on you.
Okay.
But
does the person on the opposite side know what he or she is doing, or they're unaware?
They're aware in terms of making sure that the blame doesn't come on them. They probably are not always aware that, oh, I'm gaslighting right now. Okay, now I need to do this. Gaslighting happens within ourselves as well. When we have to do something, or when we are in a certain situation, there are a lot of occasions where we end up gaslighting ourselves. That also happens. We are not aware of it. We are only aware of it later because now we are familiar with the term. That's it.
And not every small argument is not gaslighting.
No.
Okay. Because I think the terms are available easily, on internet, so people pick it up just use this, it's okay.
And also during arguments, the people involved are very busy making their point heard. Okay. We are not used to hearing to other people or listening to other people. We are all busy telling our own problems. That is where they assume that this is gaslighting.
Let's move to another term, which is ADHD. So give a little bit more idea on what ADHD is all about.
ADHD is a neurodivergent issue wherein the full form of ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactive disorder, right? So this is when the person is very restless. Not restless only when they're anxious, not restless when they have to get things done and they're not able to do it. Anxious in general. The focus time is very less compared to what the normalcy has to be, and they keep what in other terms we tell as chanchalman, they keep jumping from this to that, that to this to that. They're not able to fix their attention and focus to one certain thing, dive deeper into it, at least to a certain extent, not entirely, but at least to a certain extent, until they complete a certain phase of learning or experience in that, and then they move to a different topic. These days, people who are restless, people who are not very decisive, people who are kind of jumpy with their impulsivity, all these things, they tend to assume that they have ADHD. ADHD people do have these characters, but an individual with one of these or some of these doesn't necessarily have ADHD with them.
Okay. And I hear ADHD more in children. What is that about?
ADHD is easily diagnosed in children.
Okay.
But it does stay until later years as well. But in the present, or at least as per my experience, in the recent times, there are people who get diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 30, 40, 50, because it is unnoticed as a child. Because as a child, we assume that the child is hyperactive, the child has to do a lot of things. Again, here also ADHD is a spectrum.
Okay.
It is not that you have ADHD, you don't have ADHD. A lot of people will have ADHD with predominant hyperactivity.
Okay.
A lot of people have ADHD predominant with attention deficit. Or some people might have a combination of both.
Do you think it's happening because of social media, where we are cut down from watching videos of 10 minutes long to now 30-second reels?
ADHD is a part of it is genetic as well.
Okay.
But a lot of it does, there are external and social factors that play a role over there. The social media and the reels and the video shorts do play a role in decreasing an individual's focusing ability or the attention span, but that doesn't really trigger an ADHD in an individual.
Okay. So that is a whole new different thing altogether.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. So while we are talking about this, hyperaction and everything, another thing which comes is bipolar, right? And again, this is not everybody knows what bipolar is, and there's a lot of myth around that as well, right? So can you demystify this word for us?
Bipolar is a mood disorder once again, but it has two categories in it: bipolar, two polar, right? Extreme it is. One is an individual having manic episodes wherein they are extremely happy for the most silliest of things, or extremely angry even without a trigger being there to create such a reaction. And this phase stands there and is present for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, as long as this. And then there's a sudden down in the mood. Then they go to a depressive phase. So it's a jump between feeling very low and feeling very hyper. And these jumps don't happen suddenly, because all of us have all these things, mood swings. We are natural, so we naturally experience all these mood swings. Today we are happy, something else goes in our way, we are happy. Something doesn't go in our way, we get tense. But that's not bipolar.
Okay.
Bipolar, each phase is there present for a very long time. And it is present as a dominant factor. It is not that I'm upset, but I still have to come here and I have to do this, I'll do this. They won't be able to do that.
Okay. So, see, there are people like me who are lazy. Okay. And they sit peacefully for the entire day not doing anything. But probably they'll get up 1 hour and they finish most of the work.
Right.
Is that ADHD?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Sorry, is that bipolar? I'm so sorry.
Neither of it. Bipolar is more dominant with the emotions that you feel.
Okay.
Along with the emotions, your behavior become a part of it, because thinking, emotions and behavior are linked in any way that you want to see, right? They're multidirectionally linked. So what you are giving as an example is probably because you have a personality where you can wait until the last minute, you can work well under the pressure, so that is what works
Thanks
for you.
Thanks to engineering.
Right? That is how you have built a certain kind of pattern. You work like this because of, again, like engineering or whatever your experience was. That not necessarily be bipolar. Bipolar is predominantly to do with emotions.
Okay. So it's more of having a sea of emotions on two different directions, and then
right.
I heard a case of bipolar recently, right? And the person was able to work for 12, 13 hours, 14 hours without break, and he was all at it. And he would go not working for months together, where he would just sit 1 hour just to showcase. And one thing that he mentioned which really caught my attention is, he said it's not the face that troubled him the most, but it's a face where he has to act like he's working, but still not able to finish his work, and that troubled him a lot. Because people expect that he is all hyperactive and he is the guy who does everything extremely good. Now the same expectation carries forward, and when he is at a different stage, people have really tough time facing it, and they start punishing him for it, right? That was a very eye-opener for me to understand about this, right? This word majorly.
It gets quite confusing for themselves as well as an individual. A lot of self-doubt and questioning, saying that why am I able to do this over here? What is happening with me over here? And that itself dives them much deeper into a depressive phase. See that, I'm not able to do anything. Why am I not being productive? So naturally, when I act out a certain way, I am setting a certain kind of expectations for the people around me, including myself. So the disappointment is received from both the sides. And being pretentious at that time just to show that I can work it's very taxing. Another
topic that often used, that I'm unable to sleep, I have insomnia, right? Because I have a lot of work pressure, and that is one reason a lot of people consider going to mental health professionals. So kind of give me an idea what insomnia is all about, and when should people really look at professionals?
Insomnia is a sleep disorder wherein people have difficulty either falling asleep or staying asleep until morning or until however long they want to sleep. These days what happens is staying up late at night is cool for the teenagers, so that is where the habit starts. And then as and when the work demands and your personal demands, you stay up late trying to work on these certain things. So that becomes a pattern for the body to not fall asleep easily. The body gets conditioned to fall asleep only by 3 p.m. at night, 3 a.m. at night or 4 a.m. in the morning. It doesn't, the whole conditioning of the body gets disturbed. This can be addressed when once an individual is working on their routine, on their daily habits. There's something called a sleep hygiene, which helps a lot of people to get back in track.
What is sleep hygiene?
Sleep hygiene is certain things that they have to follow, as simple as, going to bed at the same time every day, waking up at the same time, so that the body gets reconditioned to how it has to function. Not having caffeine or alcohol after a certain point of time, let's say 6:30 in the evening, or not staying on bed during the daytime, where you are letting your body know that, hey, listen, if you're going to the bed at this certain point of time, we have to fall asleep. We're not sitting on bed and then working, making it get confused. Or it could also be that, when you try to sleep, the 45 minutes before that, no gadgets and no screens, which is the biggest challenge today.
True.
Because the eyes get confused with the blue light and they seem to think that we should not be tired yet. So a false alarm for the body. So the body starts getting activated because it is what you require at that moment. When it is this certain kind of adapted pattern, then it is not necessarily insomnia. But insomnia can start because a person has been doing this for a very long time again. Anything to do with a disorder, illness, or anything scientifically or psychologically termed, it has to be present there for a longer period of time.
Okay.
And even when you're extremely exhausted, you can't fall asleep before a certain point of time. You're so exhausted and yet you keep waking up for every 1 hour. Then you probably have issues with sleep.
Okay. And like you rightly said, so it has two parts to it. One is the pattern that we follow in general, and there's also something that has affected us which is not letting us sleep.
Right.
And people should really consider going when they have something affecting from external factor, plus that even if they have if they say they sleep at 3 o'clock, but because of this issue they're not even able to sleep at 3. They'll probably wake up till the morning. Then you think that they should
even if it is an adapted behavior, they can still go see a professional help if they are not able to change it on themselves.
Okay.
Basically, with respect to any single thing, if there's an issue, if you are emotionally overwhelmed, if you are physically overwhelmed, whatever it is, either you have to accept it, make peace so that it becomes easier for you to carry on with your duties and responsibilities, or you have to resort to resolving this. If neither of this is happening, that is when you see a professional for the help.
Got it. Great. So I have last second talk, right? So which is imposter syndrome, right? I think this happens a lot in founders because they're very common. There is a path that they run through, but there is always a feedback in their head that I'm not enough, because we keep comparing with the external world. And this is also a habit as well in many people's life, that no matter what success they have, they still feel they are not enough. And if you look at from another perspective, you can also call it very grounded. They're okay. They're cool that they want to be grounded. They don't want to recognize the great thing that they've done. So where does imposter syndrome come in place? Because it's a little dance of multiple things.
Modesty, humble, and being grounded is an individual's nature. Imposter syndrome is when the same individual is feeling that everything that I have, I lucked out. I got it, a sense of that maybe I'm fraud, and very afraid that I might be exposed as a fraud. That sense is there within me, and I'm afraid that the external world will recognize it and call me as a fraud. That is where the imposter syndrome comes in. General basic self-doubt, self-confidence, not being at the greatest level, that comes along with an individual's phase of life, professional phase, what they're doing at that moment, their recent experiences, be it with success or loss, either of this. Again, imposter syndrome is this certain kind of self-doubt that is there for a very long time in every single thing. It is not just the big event I feel like that. Only the small events I feel like that. It is there for almost all of the event, even when it is not required. And I'm afraid that now somebody will call me on as a fraud. That is where the imposter syndrome comes into the picture.
Okay, so it's not just that if they feel they're not enough, and there is always a lot of social comparison that happens, right? And when you go to LinkedIn, right, all the glory of LinkedIn is that everybody talks about what they've achieved. They did something great, they got so much of XYZ salaries, and it's a happy world out there. Even on Instagram, you go, every couple are going on honeymoon and they're going for all these foreign vacations,
right?
And probably a person who might not be doing the same thing, right? Or even the person who is on a holiday, they'll be thinking that, oh, you know what, I've gone to Bali, but somebody has gone to Amsterdam, they're awesome, right? So there's always a constant comparison because of what we see outside as well, right? And do you think that kind of triggers you to get into this phase?
Maybe at given certain situations with certain individuals, but what is happening here with your example more is that their self-concept is not at a better level.
Okay.
They have low self. There is no fear of being called out as a fraud or telling that everything is out of luck. They know that out of their hard work, they're able to go till Bali. But they also know that maybe I'm not doing enough to go into Amsterdam. That is where the self-doubt comes into the picture. It's not imposter syndrome as such.
Okay.
But that is where
but isn't it that they feel that, there is also a negative effect to it. They're not happy even at Bali, right? So how, I'm just taking the example here, right? So isn't that a thing to look into?
That is when you have to work with an individual, look at, did you really want to go to Bali? For what reasons? Just to put it on an Instagram and all these things, and probably it's not going to be very satisfying. If you go there with a certain kind of, your own to-do list, you have something that is driving you to go till there, then that makes more sense for the person to enjoy and come back. It has to do a lot with an individual work where either they have to sit with themselves and figure out what is happening, what is my requirement right now. The hustle culture is so overpowering that we forget what is it that we need. We are busy doing what the society or other people need. So our needs are not being met. That is when the happiness comes into the picture as well. I'm doing something that you are enjoying, but if I'm not enjoying, how will I feel happiness?
Correct. So I think it's more of showing to the world than what they want for themselves.
Right.
Great. So we come to the last term. I think one of the most important term as well. That's why we have kept it in the last. Is that trauma. Trauma has a lot of misconceptions around it. People use it as saying, we were talking yesterday and you said an example, a very beautiful one, like, I had a traumatic meeting. Just small thing that happened on the road in the morning, like, oh, my morning was traumatic.
Right.
And there is a lot of misconception that is linked to this as well, right? So, and there is like if you go a little deeper, there is a lot of people, we talk about childhood trauma, they talk about generational trauma.
Right.
So throw a little bit light on this whole subject and give a kind of an idea to the audience what this whole trauma is about.
Right. This is my favorite word. Trauma is subjective in terms of how people experience it. So trauma is not caused by an event in itself, but it is how we perceive the event and how this event has an impact on me. A certain kind of situation might disturb you, but might be traumatic for me because of other history I have.
What is trauma in the first place?
Trauma basically is when an individual gets disturbed very deeply.
Okay.
And they're not able to cope up with this disturb or the damage that has done in terms of how they are getting affected. Trauma has nothing to do with an event as such, like because there is all this trauma healing and all. If we had to change the event, what are we doing with you while trauma healing? We have to go back to the time, redo the whole event and come. Trauma is more of how an individual gets impacted due to a certain kind of situation, due to a certain kind of scenario or an experience where it affects them so deeply that their coping mechanism, their normalcy of functioning gets disturbed.
Okay. So let's say somebody is driving the car and they're going to office and they met with a small accident. Nothing serious, but something. And do you call that a trauma?
If that experience has had such a great impact on the individual that they're not able to sit and drive once again in their life, or every time, even if they're not driving, they have to move in the specific vehicle, they get triggered, and it is an uneasiness that they experience every time they're sitting in a vehicle or a car, then that could be a traumatic event for that person. So they're disturbed by this certain kind of situation.
Okay. So then what is the concept of this childhood trauma coming from?
So in trauma, there are different aspects to it. One is a general trauma, or what people recognize as PTSD.
Is it like a temporary thing? If it's a normal, then you say general trauma.
It is not the temporary thing. A person might heal eventually, but healing in mental health is not entirely recovering. There's still a minute part of it somewhere, but it isn't disturbing you today.
Correct.
Remembering that or something related to that doesn't trigger you today. That is how we decide that, okay, you have healed now from this certain thing. So in trauma, the thing is that there is, when we are talking about different aspects of trauma, something called as PTSD, which again is something that people misuse a lot of times.
What is PTSD?
PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. After a trauma, post-traumatic, the stress disorder. After a certain kind of trauma, the stress that they have built up, either to that specific thing or something that the body has taken up in a wrong way. It's a wrong sign that the body has got adapted to. That is when the PTSD comes into the picture. That is with respect to one event, one occasion, one situation. That is when the PTSD comes into the picture. Childhood trauma is when a lot of this traumatic event starts at a younger age, or it has happened in the younger age. There's also something called as complex trauma. Complex trauma and childhood trauma are almost overlapping, but they're still different. Complex trauma is when minute traumatic events keep happening quite frequently for a prolonged period of time. Childhood trauma is when it has started in the childhood. Either it is over, now the traumatic event is not a recurring event, or it is still present. It started from childhood and it is still present till now. Either of this can be considered as childhood trauma.
Okay.
When it comes to generational trauma is more to do more biologically than just psychologically as well. There are certain genes that get altered. As simple as if you consider all these Chernobyl attacks and all these very big events where the whole village, the whole nation got disturbed, their kids, the future generations tend to carry this one certain altered gene. The basic DNA is the same, but there's a certain part of the DNA after the trauma gets altered.
Okay.
So, maybe the third or the fourth generation after the event is still having a lot of anxiety without their personal experience of anything that triggers anxiety as such. That is when the generational trauma comes into the picture.
Okay. To understand it even better, to make it more simpler, because there's a lot of things to consume. So I have heard a few cases very common to related to trauma, right? One is, of course, when you look at the modern day parenting, people talk about beating child as a childhood trauma and stuff like that. And if you're beaten, you tend to carry that trauma and stuff like that. So what is around this whole beating of the child concept?
Beating of the child in itself, it became an issue when the parents weren't able to come back and communicate their emotions with the child in any ways that they knew. If I just keep hitting the child without a reason, without telling what the mistake is of the child, without telling why am I so frustrated, the child is just going to get used to getting beatings all the single time. So in the next time a person raises their voice towards the same child, it knows that this is how it is going to go. There is a certain kind of response that they have adapted according to the situation. With the present parenting issues, it is more of how the individual received it. For example, if an individual's parent was very strict, extremely strict, and the individual knows the difficulties that came along with growing up with a strict parent, they would decide that, I don't want to be like my father to my kid. I don't want to be like my mother to my kid. This is something that they that they learn much earlier than what they want to be. They learn what they don't want to be.
Because they saw that they got beaten, they don't want to be their kid. As simple as that.
So they decide that this is how I want to do the parenting. If they are able to convince the child, make the child learn about the punishments and the rewards, the right and wrong, however the punishment given is okay, until both of them are done according to the situation. If it is just one thing, if the parent, I was reading this one book called as Freud's Reader. It's by the Penguin publication. It's my current book, okay. There they write this one beautiful sentence that says, for a lot of people, adulthood is a long-lasting hangover from their childhood. It's a very long-lasting hangover from their childhood. This is where either their trauma as a complex trauma is still being shown out or acted out in their adulthood, or when they are parent and when something from their childhood is resonating over there, they are able to find some kind of similarities, they tend to act out in the similar way.
Correct. I mean, most of the time your adulthood is more about fulfilling your childhood with a little more money.
Right.
Right. So you want to do things that you could not do as a child.
Right.
And you carry that along. But I think what you're saying is a little bit of here and there belt and Latin gaze is not bad.
Right. That happens. If the individual has better understanding of what happened and they're not blindly continuing it because this is the way that they know. I know that this is how my parents did, so I'm going to do the same without any alterations. Even after seeing the effects, there probably a certain part of generational trauma is being acted upon the future generation.
When we say generational trauma, right, a very common Indian scenario is daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. The whole thing around that. That okay, fine, what, my mother-in-law did the same thing to me and I'm going to do the same. Continue that family culture. So there's a very thin line difference again here as well, right, where the daughter-in-law doesn't have control over anything as such, right, and they face a lot of issues. And modern days, though, it's even worse scenario because everybody has access to whatever they want to do. Earlier, people used to succumb a lot of emotions. Now people are okay. I mean, they are open about it. So what's a part of generational trauma in this case, majorly, in a family dynamics?
It is a known superstition that Saas Bahu means there has to be a war there. That is what the social media and everything preaches us. It is not just our assumption. Here the generational trauma can be looked from two ways, where the woman in itself had issues with her mother or her mother-in-law, and then she decides to be this certain kind of woman in the house. Here, this is a dynamic issue, right? The power dynamics over there. Who has the upper hand? This also comes with how the society functions. Women are given certain kind of power in the house, in the kitchen. Where else are they given this kind of power? So they're used to being the ruler at that place. This is how it has to function. When there is a certain kind of change in terms of daughter-in-law coming to the house, they feel threatened. It says, this was my area. Now there's somebody else who have to do. And they look at it from the same perspective. It is like I'm wearing a blue color glass. I perceive the world to be in blue shades. Somebody else is wearing a red color glass. They perceive the world to be in red shade. So it is more to do with that individual.
Both are not wrong.
Both are not wrong from their own perspective. They are doing it to be more safer in terms of I have to be okay. I have to be emotionally safe. I have to be physically safe. I need to have this freedom to do that over there. So that is when these complications come into the picture. It is more to do with their individual work. How are they okay to accept changes, be okay with whatever is coming in their way, adapt accordingly. It is more to do with individual work as well. If one of them, either the daughter-in-law or the mother-in-law, is okay to adjust, have more patience and figure out a middle ground to work between there, you are breaking a generational trauma there.
But if say the mother has faced similar issues from her mother-in-law, and the daughter automatically has a fear of going to a new home,
Right.
is this a generational trauma case?
I think this wouldn't come as a generational trauma as such. This is more of social norms and social expectations.
Okay.
As simple as women means these responsibilities, men means these responsibilities. So naturally, somewhere we are taught as a term, from a society that you are the daughter, you will go adjust more. We tend to forget to show this kind of importance of adjustment to men also. But I know for a fact that there are a lot of changes that are happening in the present days. Men are also observing a lot of things, or the women who had to undergo a lot of this are teaching this to their son.
True.
Or the men around them in a right way. So that doesn't come under generational trauma as such. But it comes more in terms of, trauma is a quite heavy word.
Okay.
Right? It depends on how one perceives it. If this is something that's just an issue and I have to adapt to it, it's not a very traumatic thing for the person.
Okay.
But if this in itself is a very big deal and the person is afraid of that, okay, you know what, I know if I start saying something over here, everybody will have an issue, and I know how it became the last time when people started having issues. There probably a certain part of their history or the trauma is
They recall that
acting out.
event every time there
Yes.
is something, some similar trigger that is there.
That is when their trauma is acting out. Again, all of these come under spectrum: mild, severe, moderate, or how they...
Depends on people to
Yes, yes.
Great. Thanks a lot for covering such a vast number of topics, words, keywords specifically, and I think the viewers also would have got a lot of understanding and
Right.
clarity for that matter. I have a very common question. I mean, I don't know how many of them agree with me on this. That when we talked about all these terms, right? So there is one part of me which is saying, you know what, I have this, I have some part of that,
Right.
I also have some little here and there that.
Right.
Also, I'm self-diagnosing myself. I'm like, okay, I asked you multiple times also here, do I have this?
Right.
Or do I have that? I don't know if it's
Right.
like a fancy choosing thing that I did, but
Right,
it's a natural to kind of, and when you go to Google, even if you say I have stomach pain, it will say, first thing it will say is cancer.
Right.
Right? And because of the very easy access to wrong information,
Right.
why does this feeling comes in the first place?
This is also called as a medical student syndrome, if I'm not wrong, where people feel that, oh, even I have this. While we are diagnosing to others, we are able to relate in a certain way. That relatability comes into the picture. The moment relatability comes, we get concerned. We're like, oh, do I also have this? Should I be concerned over this? That is very natural, but the key points is to make sure, do you do this depending on the situation, or do you do this all the single time throughout for a very long period of time? Then you need to go seek help.
Okay.
If it is a situational, because you're getting influenced by people around you, by the situation, that's okay. That's nothing to worry about.
So it was great that we talked about the terminologies which are misinterpreted or misused most of the time, right? Now I want to kind of discuss about few cases. I'll tell you why this whole context is there. So generally what happens when you talk about founders or top management, the lifestyle is a little different, right? They are the ones, the whole ecosystem expects them to be on the top, and they get that treatment as well. A boss is always treated a little differently in an office. And you get the respect, you get the priority, you get the freedom to an extent, right? And everybody expect you to be the best, because that's what people look up to, right? And in all of this, there is a side of you which gets that habitual, and there is a lot of ego association that happens with it as well. That okay, next time when I go there, I want that VIP treatment. And a lot of people work towards that, and they grow their life around it. And when such things happen, we are the people who will have a very high optimistic value. Like, let's say sales is not happening. You go and give a motivation speech and you fix the problem, you motivate the people, you're like, do it. This is, if you see Wolf of Wall Street, it's like, yes, and all that energy. And these are all very high energy activities.
Right.
Now, when you look at mental health, you need certain vulnerability also to kind of accept that, you know what, I have this problem,
Right.
or I am facing certain things that I'm not very at my best, right? Accepting that itself is very hard. You know, we take it on the ego and, you know, be like, oh, okay, you know what, this is a very layman's thing. I mean, we probably who could not achieve something are feeling these things. There is a lot of this, you know, taboo around it as well, that it is only for people who can't do great things, not for me who is like extremely good and all of that stuff, right? And accepting itself is a big problem. When it comes to that, how are they even going to look at mental health as a element to kind of you know, see it as a problem? But of course they will have problems. It's not like they are some different people, they are humans at the end of the day. So have you seen some cases or some situations where this has happened for let's say even any people who are in a high pressure job or in a you know, top positions majorly?
Right. I can give you a couple of examples. The name and the every details are changed because we have to maintain certain kind of confidentiality. So if anybody is able to relate to this, it's highly coincidental. That's it, right? So like for example, there was this one time where one of my clients, let's name him Rahul, right, age around a certain kind of middle age, okay, so where he came in and he's a very high performing, very you know, well maintained, highly respected person in his company, one of the biggest companies, right, and he's in the higher status, higher managerial position and everything. So he is used to taking the sole decisions. He's used to taking these a lot of important calls the way he needs it because he has that power to do. But back when he comes to his home, where it's a joint family, he's one of the youngest members of the family. So people are not looking at him as so and so person from so and so company. They're looking at as, you know, hum ghar ka beta, like, you know, he's the our own Rahul.
Okay.
Why yeah, something like that, right? So there because we like when that certain kind of attention we receive and we are able to perform our best in a certain kind of situation, we get a lot of acknowledgement. Professionally, you get a lot easily. The acknowledgements are given much more easily. Financial status is one thing, you're earning money, certain thing, how many projects you take up and all these things. In the personal life, acknowledgements are not given that easily.
True.
I mean, it is given in multiple ways, but you can't match that. It's very different. So there comes a question of how to, you know, I need the same kind of treatment from my family as well. But for family, he's not a manager. They're like, hey, we are all there, elder to you, so we will do all these things. You sit, you come, attend the function and go, that's it. Or something like that, you know.
You are in the chairs.
You're in the chairs. So what happens is that the individual or this Rahul starts building up the certain kind of disappointment and arrogance, saying that, you know, they don't respect me, you know, what and all high, you know, projects that I learn so much from the external world. You don't value my opinion at all. When that comes, naturally it is okay, or this is how the body functions, that they start going towards what they like. As a response to all of these things, Rahul will start avoiding the family a little bit more, or diving into the work, saying that, you know, I don't like that, I like this and I'm doing good here, I'm getting reward here, let me just bury myself more in work. They get busy burying themselves at work or busy avoiding the family. As a result, the family will grow distant over there, and then they will be like, why does he have to do this? Are you seeing the misunderstanding that is happening here?
Sure.
One where Rahul itself is driving people away because of the difference in expectations he has from people due to confusion of role that he's playing. If he's back at home, he has to play the role of a husband, a son, a brother, a father, or whatever the role is. When he goes back to the professional out space, there he can play whatever manager role he has to play. The individual, anybody who it is, they have to understand at the given situation, if I am demanding a certain thing from you, I am demanding it as a son, as a daughter, or as a manager. because then it is easier to manage the disappointments that you face. Not that family is always unacknowledging whatever you are doing, but the way the family does it and the way a professional people do it is very different. So you receive it very differently. Family would be very proud of you. It would talk all good things about you. They would brag about you with respect to others. But when you are there, they will pull your leg.
Correct.
It is the nature of how a family functions. So it is very difficult for people to understand that with power also comes a certain kind of responsibility, that I need to play this role here in this certain way, and then I don't have to play this role all the time. That is one big confusion that most of the people have, especially in working companies or at a higher managerial state. And then I would like to take another example with females, because with men, how the responsibility is assumed, so is with the females. And most of the females get very confused deciding which role are they playing. Okay. For example, let's take a female named Kriti, and in her probably early 30s or late 30s, newly married and have to do well at her work because she is running an NGO or something like that. She's doing very well in her professional life. When she comes back home to the certain kind of adjustment, she has to realize that she's coming back home as a daughter-in-law who has her responsibilities, as a mother probably who has her responsibilities. She can't come back and tell, I work so much outside and I come back and the family is still expecting more from me. As a man, how your responsibilities are added upon because of your gender, so is done with the female. Again, over here, the misunderstanding and the misinterpretation happens both ways. Where I see it in a wrong way, so I misinterpret it. Where people tend to, how you said, everybody expects the best from you if you're giving your best. So people will tell, you can do all this work, you can't do this one work at home. All our mothers tell this.
True.
Right? So this kind of misunderstanding happens when nobody is able to differentiate the roles that they are playing. So when we come back to this example of Kriti, she is again very highly performing person in her professional field, able to manage a lot of crisis and everything. When she comes back home, she doesn't have to address the crisis in equal power. She has other people also along with her in her personal life who will come with her to help her at the moment of crisis. She can't overpower others in the family dynamics, telling that, no, this is how I do at work, this is how I want to do it here also.
They mimic the same fashion they do in work.
Right.
And in person they try to do the same thing.
Right. So this is one of the major issues with women when they are in these kind of situations. If we are considering women at a little later ages, probably in their late 40s or mid 40s and 50s, they also have to pay a little extra attention towards their health. That's the age of menopause, and along with that comes a lot of emotional, mental and physical difficulties that they'll have to face. So the more self-aware an individual is, the better it is for them. Ignorance is bliss doesn't work in mental health, no matter whatever.
Sooner the better.
Yes.
Sooner they take some help, the better it is.
Yes.
Great. I mean, so far we've been talking about a lot of cases, a lot of problems as such, right? Now, I'm taking a very general case here that, what happens in Indian scenario, whatever disease you have, first thing is go to a medical shop, take a Dolo 650 or paracetamol, and most of your things are, this is a common misconception, right? But it works for some people, at times, right? You think, okay, fine, body pain, this. So there are I'm just trying to give you a common example, right? So in mental health, because I equally believe that everything has to be resolved case by case most of the times, and it's very complex when it comes to individual. We are talking about general case here, but when individual, their life is different, their problem density is different. So let's say if we have to really talk about solution,
Right.
because that's also one to cover. What is this Dolo 650 of mental health, which is basically some common things that somebody can do to at least feel better before they consult a professional?
That's a nice term, Dolo 650 of mental health, right? But like how you said, anything to do with mental health, even physical health for that matter, is quite subjective after a certain point. General fever, okay, you know this. But when you have fever, it affects you a little differently than how it does to a different person. So you do some extra things to add on to that, right? All these basic things is any kind of self-care comes into the picture. Self-care done on a frequent basis, regularly, without there is a need to do it because you are in difficulty. It's not like after the war is there, then you start practicing how to fight the war. That doesn't work over here. With respect to mental health, with respect to the effect it has on your professional life, physical life, everywhere, any kind of self-care, like for example, like how I mentioned in the previous question, sleep hygiene, maintaining a certain kind of routine so that the body doesn't get confused in terms of having a certain kind of physical exercise as a part of your routine, or maybe journaling. But I know a lot of people have this certain kind of superstition saying that, yeah, you go to a therapist, they'll talk, they'll ask you to write, nothing works for me. There's a whole process of how and when the journaling has to be done. It has to be done with a certain kind of purpose. It has to be done with a certain kind of initiative. There's difference when I'm just randomly writing down how my day is than me writing down because I want to express my emotions specifically. All these tiny things is where the professionals come into the picture. But when it is given as a general suggestion, mindfulness can be practiced. But again, mindfulness, a lot of people might find difficulty, so they can adapt it to their ability of how doing it. Meditation, yoga, all these things come under the mindfulness. For people who can't do this for a longer period of time, or who are hypersensitive, where when they give attention that starts disturbing them, they start noticing the slightest of changes, then they can do a different version of mindfulness. So sleep hygiene, a certain kind of mindfulness, certain kind of physical exercise, which is very important, and being very self-aware about how am I feeling, what do I do when I feel a certain kind of emotion. If you have a rough picture of your pattern, if you want to break the pattern, it comes easy.
Rather than you should be self-aware.
Yes. Rather than you being very oblivious to it, and then you don't know what to do with all these certain things.
Okay.
The more question marks, the more trouble there is.
Okay. And how does motivation play a role? Does it help?
Motivation helps. Motivation, again, there's self-motivation, there's motivation that you seek from the external world.
Yeah.
When I'm telling external world, it either can be podcasts or listening to your favorite person talk about their life, or from your personal life, professional life, where they're saying that, hey, you did a good job. Easy communication with ourselves and with others makes it easy to seek all these minute things that will help us make it easier for ourselves. As simple as, if I want a certain kind of acknowledgement, and I know that I have people who generally give it to me whenever I need it, and I go and tell them that, hey, I'm feeling really low today. I don't know why. I've just been in a phase of self-doubting. As your people, they will step in to come and tell that, hey, you know what, you're doing so well. We need to ask what we need. We can't sit and wait for things to fall into our place, come into our lap all of a sudden. So the more open we are with ourselves, saying that I acknowledge that this is happening with me. I know I'm very upset. The minute this certain kind of transparency comes within us, forget others. The taboo is somewhere still there within us. Why should I go? Why should I go to therapy? But if we start acknowledging this, then it becomes easier to actually communicate it with others or receive the help in whatever way is possible around us.
While we talk about the solution, right. I also want to really highlight on a very specific topic. When we're in a hustle culture,
right.
Work-life balance comes, at a cost. Right now, how does one achieve work-life balance?
When we are able to compartmentalize and understand that though work is important for sustainment and surviving in today's world, certain amount of priorities and time is given to the personal life as well. This also is not only an individual concept, it is an organizational concept as well. When the organization is also letting people prioritize family at times when required, where they're also like as simple as you see this one very basic concept that taking kids to the work or taking family to the work day or something
Pets,
like that, pets or something like that, right? So where the organization is also somewhere communicating that we acknowledge whatever you're doing here is important, but somewhere this time and energy and emotion has to go to your personal life as well. When it comes down to doing it on one-on-one or every individual basis, it comes to the thought of how a person is able to understand how much of time are they spending with their family. If it is an important project, 1 month you can't give a family a lot of time, that's okay, but after that, how are you making up to it? It is all under your importance. What is it that you value? How are you compartmentalizing to find a certain kind of balance? Balance doesn't mean you overdo this and to make up to this you overcompensate over here. It is all about finding a certain kind of middle ground, where while I'm doing this, I know that I have put this on halt. I come back to this because it has to be attended after a certain kind of time.
But having an awareness of what am I missing plus
Right.
what I need to make up for is important.
See, when we're talking about self-awareness, if I know how am I feeling emotionally, it is more easy for me to acknowledge how are people around me feeling as well. Not that you have to be a pro at it or you have to be careful about others' emotions. It naturally becomes a tendency to be like, hey, you know what, I'm a little like this, I need this. So if I am emotionally stressed and I know to deal with my stress, I need to go hang out with my friends or with my family, I will go seek out this help very naturally. The work-life balance is happening over there naturally. With the self-awareness, we are able to adapt a certain kind of understanding with the work-life balance as well. So the more they're able to understand where is their time going, is it going equally, are they okay with it? If they're not okay with it, they have to come and work towards it. If they're okay with it, that is when we tend to forget one part of it. It will either become too much of family or too much of work.
So I'll come to a last question of this podcast, which is, I mean, I strongly believe this. I really feel that it needs an attention, and I think I repeat it so many times in and around. And that is the reason why I even started Founders of Bangalore in the first place as an initiative. Is that generally founders are the outliers in the system, right? And they are trying to do something, they're trying to build something. And in that process, they are lonely. So when I say lonely, basically see who are the kind of people you deal with during your work. Either it's clients, either it's vendors, or it's employees, or it's somebody who's a third party where you have a transactional conversation, right? And pretty much everybody in the ecosystem expects the founders to be always at their best, right? Now what happens, unless they have a very good support system, they still be able to pull it off. But the moment they lose that support system, right, or their family sometimes cannot understand what they do because they're trying to build something on their own, they themselves have a lot of things to figure out, while the family has no clue, and they have a certain expectations, and then that also has to be fulfilled. And if you go to your friends, most of them are in a different career path altogether. They're a corporate, they're earning very good, and their life is again different, so you can't really have a understanding of that, right? So in this whole process, somewhere you feel lonely in the journey, right? And how does one come out of it?
Loneliness comes when there is a lack of certain kind of content in the emotional attachments. This is when the loneliness comes. Like you said, you're targeting the founders mainly because that is where you feel belonged. So there's a certain kind of your loneliness that feels addressed over there. You feel a sense of, I belong here. I belong in this certain kind of environment. I belong with this certain kind of people. If you observe very carefully, this loneliness comes very, it is not a permanent thing that is there for most of us. You feel lonely when you have a lot of ideas to talk and you don't have anybody to share it with. Because you are looking for somebody to share it with on a same level.
Correct.
Not somebody who's out of this certain kind of topic or out of the certain kind of professional experience. So the loneliness, when an individual, be it a founder, be it anybody else, when they're experiencing this certain kind of loneliness, they need to take a step back and look at how are they doing otherwise. Where is this stepping from, or where is this budding from? If it is a certain kind of loneliness in terms of not being able to express certain kind of distress in the workspace to the family, and like how you said, they keep doing better, they keep building better. So there is a picture. If somebody tells I'm a CEO, you already imagine certain kind of traits that the person needs to have, certain kind of requirements the person needs to have. If they are able to find a person, find a moment, a place where they can be vulnerable with themselves or in the presence of others. Even if I am being vulnerable with one of my friends or some person who's not from the same field, but I am okay to be vulnerable over there. While I'm being vulnerable, all I need is a certain kind of emotional support. I don't need a solution there as such. It can be anybody who is giving me that. If I am able to recognize this and make it a practice to tell that I am okay to be vulnerable at these certain kind of times, so that the people around me also adapt to the certain kind of thing. Otherwise, I'm painting a false picture that I am strong, I am perfect, I have no issues, I have the solutions for every problem that comes along the way. If I am okay to be vulnerable, show this vulnerability towards certain people at least, it becomes a habit that the moment I feel a certain kind of loneliness, I come back to them naturally. They are also used to that, she is doing her best, she is going in the certain way. If she has a difficulty, if there's a difficulty, she'll come back and talk about it with us. That becomes a pattern that they also pick up from us. So loneliness is something that can be addressed when there's a certain kind of emotional satisfaction. This either can be a place where you have to sit down. I think that is why all these solo trips are more in trend. Not because everybody who's doing it is a lonely person, but there's a certain kind of emotional satisfaction that they're getting, a sense of accomplishment. If you are able to do that, either with yourself or with somebody or somebody's presence or a group of people, this is where also all this, like how you started this Founders of Bengaluru, it's a very amazing initiative. Just like this, you have to find where do you feel belonged.
Correct.
At different kind of requirements. It can't be just one. We all need a lot of options. Too many things happening. There are too many changes that keep happening. It can't be just one thing and then you just keep going there every single time.
Correct.
Then people listening to you will also have a burnout. Right? So it has to be different kind of groups. It has to be multiple options so that you go here once and then some other time you want to change. Any kind of practice for self-care, for emotional care, it can't be very monotonous all the time. The moment it gets very monotonous, the self-motivation starts becoming low eventually. There has to be something interesting happening in between. If it is not happening around, you have to seek for it in a certain point. So anybody, the moment there's a sense of loneliness, take a step back, look at how are you feeling emotionally. How can you address this emotional dissatisfaction that you're feeling? Anything that you need at that minute will help you. If not on a longer run, at least for that day, it will help you make it a little more easy.
Makes a lot of sense in terms of how we approach the problem, right? And thanks a lot for a very different perspective on this. And while we talk about perspectives, and I know you from some time, right? That I also want to understand, you are associated with Reroute. Right? And you guys work a lot on mental health and can you kind of brief about it, what you do and what are the initiatives that are budding at Reroute?
Okay. Reroute is a place where we are providing one-on-one sessions as well. We have a child psychologist. I am there handling trauma or the adult psychology. We also have a psychiatrist. We are trying to provide a lot of one-on-one sessions for anybody who's in need, who's in distress. We are also coming up with a lot of activities in terms of group therapies, where we are starting different groups for people who need, for people with anxiety, certain kind of anxiety group therapy, for people who want to build a certain kind of social skills, then that for people who want to empathize or who want to learn about this concept of empathizing, then that. A lot of group therapies where we are opening it up for a group of 8 to 10 people at a time, where we will be talking to them, discussing a lot of situations about their personal life or about general concerns, taking it as general cases. So this is something that we are providing. We also provide a lot of diagnosis tests, so any kind of psychological tests per se. So when people need to know, do I have ADHD, do I not have ADHD? Internet provides you a lot of tests, but we have much more reliable tests that we provide. We also have the professionals who will do it in the right way. So these are some of the activities that we are getting into right now.
Wonderful. I mean, if you let me talk, I'll go on for the whole day. Right? I think we'll have a lot of wonderful conversations as well. But it was great talking to you about the aspect. I mean, it was nice exploring the world of psychology and mental health professionals and understanding some terms and lots of things happening around those terms, and also getting to know some cases that how high performing individuals go through, right? And at this end, some solutions as well. So I think we covered a spectrum of things in this. We are back to full circle, right? And as the time pressing, we have to end the show, right? But I think it was a great conversation that we had, and I hope even the audience had a similar experience. They got to know about a lot of things. If there is anything that you loved during the show, please do comment in the comment section below. And wonderful. Thanks a lot for coming. Do you have any closing notes that you want to talk about?
Thank you for having me. I think self-awareness in terms of mental health is very important. Now that some of the people are aware, some of the people are still hesitant and going behind the taboo. Letting them know that you don't have to consider therapy or mental health only when somebody has to go crazy, even when they have to address any kind of emotional distress. That is all that happens over here. When you need a certain kind of clarity, when you want to address a certain kind of emotional distress and get a better understanding and some knowledgeable solutions, it is okay to speak about the issues. We don't have to wait until one of some Hollywood or Bollywood actress tell, and then we'll tell like, okay, now this seems more normal. We don't have to wait until that happens. So I think this is a very great opportunity for me. Thank you for that, and thank you for normalizing the whole concept of mental health for your audience.
That's great. That's so sweet. So thanks a lot for staying till the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned a lot of things around it. So if you do, please do share it with your friends and family, or the founder friend that you have whom you want to send this to him or her and say that this is important, and just go through it. So once again, thank you everybody, and have a great day ahead. Thank you.